In heaven, everything is fine. In heaven, everything is fine. I'm on pain medication and you got mine. I hope that I had a swollen face because I had like a tooth operation or something. But yes, I'm fine, unfortunately. So sorry that my performance is not that good. Obviously, I wanted to impersonate the lady in the radiator from David Lynch's first feature masterpiece, Eraserhead, and she's singing In Heaven Everything is Fine. But yes, we are today making a special episode about David Lynch, obviously, because the witch is dead, the witch is dead. That's, of course, a quote from one of his favorite films, The Wizard of Oz. For sure, for sure. And I absolutely adore David Lynch, obviously. I think he's not only, or was not only, one of the greatest film directors of all time, now he's dead, but maybe, probably, one of the greatest artists in general in the history of humanity. And Tom, I think you hate him pretty much.
That's a bit of a mischaracterization. I don't hate him. I mean, personally, from what I've seen from behind the scenes and whatever, as a person, he seems to be really nice, or was really nice. I don't even hate his films. I think they are decent. They're pretty good mostly. But, like, really my main issue is what you just said, that people praise him in high heavens and say, like, oh, he's one of the greatest directors, greatest artists, blah, 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 when he's such an, like, maybe slightly above average director, fairly interesting writer, even though I don't think he's particularly great, even at that. And yeah, outside of his films, I haven't really engaged with anything he's done. I think he is also like a painter and a musician and stuff, so I'm not familiar with that. But judging solely from his films, yeah, he's not that great.
He's also awesome as a painter and as a musician and as a writer. He also wrote books and so on. He's also an actor, of course. So he is doing a lot, or has done a lot of stuff. But yes, I think his greatest achievements are in cinema. And yes, I don't know. How can you precisely and in a short amount of time describe? Oh, I think it's great how our light is even flickering a little bit. I hope you can see that. That's also a great David Lynch image. What makes David Lynch so amazing? So, why does he deserve his reputation as one of the greatest geniuses? I think he might be still completely underrated, honestly, in general, because he is, just in the sense that he uses narrative and character easily on the same level as, for example, a writer like Dostoevsky, maybe even above him in certain respects. For example, David Lynch is probably, I mean, for me, definitely the person that depicts things like traumatization and re-traumatization the best in all of art history that I have ever experienced. I will give you my classic example, of course, Twin Peaks, the show. It's a television show. You think it's maybe slightly above average, and fuck you for that, Tom. There's also a great David Lynch quote or story. He was smoking weed and he went to a Bob Dylan concert and he was like high, completely high as a kite. And then when Bob Dylan went out, he saw how small Bob Dylan is. So he turned back to his ex-girlfriend and said, "Look how small his jeans are. His guitar is just this big." And then he went out of the concert. And there he met his like friend, and they were like living together. And then his friend said, "Nobody walks out of Bob Dylan." And then David Lynch said, "I walk out of Dylan, fuck you." And then his friend threw him out of their, I don't know, place where they were living, I guess. But yes, my classic example to showcase how great David Lynch is, let's just think back to Twin Peaks, the show, when the FBI agent is figuring out who the killer is, and how does he figure it out? He takes a chewing gum, puts it in his mouth, and then one of the characters in the room says, I really like that gum. I like this gum was in style when I was a child. And from that moment, without any context even, you don't even need context here, you understand that this character was raped as a child, is therefore so fucked up that he raped and murdered his own daughter. And you get all of this from this simple line. That is absolutely incredible. There's no other artist who showcases in this detail, with this simple, concrete, everyday metaphors, such deep, psychological, even cosmic dimensions of the human condition and so on. I mean, don't you agree with that, Tom?
No. It would be a good example if it was true, because in actuality what happens in the scene, yes, everything you described, he finds out who the killer is because the guy is saying, oh, this gum was in style when I was a kid or whatever. But why does the character from that know that he's the killer? Because like 10 episodes earlier or whatever, he has a dream where a giant visits him and tells him 3 clues, like in a fucking children's game. One of them is like an owl and or whatever, and then a few episodes later he sees an owl, and that's the big clue. And then the other clue, I forgot the third one if there was one, but the other clue is, oh yeah, pay attention to chewing gum. And then 10 episodes later, a character says something about chewing gum, and that's the big hint. That's so fucking stupid. That's bad writing.
It's brilliant writing. And I can tell you another example, Tom, maybe you don't know it, where I have actual evidence how brilliantly this really works and how it works without context. So yes, you're right. There is a context to this, probably so that the audience can understand it better. But I'm serious when I say, without this chewing gum clue, without this dream of this giant, who is, by the way, of course, related to the dwarf. That's also a great line in the series when he said, when this FBI agent says, I had another dream, but this time there was a giant, and then another character says like, I think he's probably related to the dwarf. And it makes perfect sense, even though it's completely absurd. So, but you immediately get it. Yes, they are related, of course, but they are complete opposites. So you immediately get this idea that extreme opposites have to be related in some way. And that's actually true. Because through difference, you create definitions. At least that's one of the ways you can do this. But that's another topic altogether. That's like philosophy and so on, and linguistics. But let's think about Lost Highway. Have you seen this movie? Oh, it's so brilliant. Of course, another masterpiece and so on. And what it is about, it's about some random dude who is like a saxophone player, and he basically wakes up one day and his wife got murdered, and then he's arrested as the murderer. And a few days later, the police is showing into his cage, in prison, and there is a completely different person. And so they are setting this different person free. This different person has his own life, his own memories. He has friends, he has a family, he has relationships, and so on. But then he meets a woman, a femme fatale, who's like the wife of a big gangster boss and so on. And he gets into a relationship with her. And then at one point they have sex together to the end of the movie. And she then says, "You can never have me." And then he stands up and he's the old guy again from the prison, the saxophone player. And then he drives away and gets hunted by the police. And then the movie is over and he screams while he's driving and he's doing like... And I know people who watched this movie in the opening night, walked out of the cinema and said, that's a biopic about O.J. Simpson. The movie has nothing to do with O.J. Simpson. There isn't even a black person in this movie. But David Lynch, years later, confirmed in an interview, yes, this entire movie is based on O.J. Simpson. It's what happens, according to David Lynch, in the subconscious of O.J. Simpson, who he believes has murdered 2 people. And he watched interviews with O.J. Simpson and he thought to himself, how can this person continue to live? What happens if you have that much guilt inside of you? And for David Lynch, it seems intuitively to be the case that if you have so much guilt inside you, maybe something inside your consciousness breaks and a different type of consciousness or personality arises in a sense. So the guilt can be buried together with a type of personality that you had and a new type of personality arrives. And so for David Lynch, the interesting question is, how can this tension, how can those 2 personalities coexist? And how interesting would it be if this new personality slowly breaks open and this old guilt-ridden personality slowly arrives and has to confront itself, sees itself, is seeing itself for maybe the first time since a long time in the mirror, so to speak. And this is what the entire movie is about. It's a super abstract concept. Tell me another artist in the history of art who tackles such themes, where the question is, how can I show something like this, the breaking of the conscious and the arrival of the subconscious guilt-ridden personality, how can I tell this in images? Not by explaining it or anything like that, only in images. Tell me another artist who even tackles such themes in such a way. And how can it be that this actually works, that people actually walk out of the cinema without any other context but the movie and immediately get, yes, this is basically a biopic about O.J. Simpson. You have to agree, Tom, that is absolutely incredible. And if you don't get this, then it might be because it's too subtle for you, because it's too intricate and too detailed and too subtle.
There are a few things I have to say about this. First of all, as I'm said, I haven't actually seen the film, so it's a bit difficult for me to discuss this. I really just have to take your word of your description. I don't know, I think I have to watch the film actually to give my opinion about it. But what I can say is that what it sounds like is that he mainly made a film about guilt, I guess, and people getting away, coming from the film and thinking it's an O.J. Simpson biopic because he's a guilt-ridden person doesn't seem like an achievement. If you say it's not openly about him, it's just about his subconscious experience or whatever. How does his subconscious experience differentiate from like any other criminal or whatever, so that you can't just say it's a coincidence that the people think of O.J. Simpson because it happened to be like a big case at that time? And how can you tell me that David Lynch didn't just 10 years later say, oh yeah, of course it was about O.J. Simpson, because people said it after he came out of the theater? And really what David Lynch is a genius at is making people believe that he's a genius. He's a better marketer, I think, than an artist.
I completely and utterly disagree with that, honestly. But the parallels between the O.J. Simpson case are, of course, also a little bit more direct in the sense that he murders his wife in the movie, and at the end we have this famous shot basically recreated to some extent, where he's driving away from dozens of police cars and so on, and that's like the last image of the film. And we have also the famous mystery man in this movie, who has like a camera, and he films the protagonist. And the protagonist in the beginning of the movie says, I don't have a camera because I like to remember things my own way, not necessarily how they happened and so on. And then you see shots through this black and white camera that the mystery man is pointing at the protagonist, and you see the protagonist again, he's forced through the medium of cinema to confront himself as what he really is. And you see those images and they look like television images. And you see him getting into the car, driving away through this television camera, basically, just like a celebrity would run away from the press and so on, because he doesn't want to be confronted with something that he has done. So there are those strange similarities, but again, I would have never understood that this was about O.J. Simpson, honestly. Just from watching the movie. But I can definitely see it now that people told me about it and that Lynch has confirmed it. I definitely see the parallels, and I think you can get to that conclusion just by watching the movie and knowing about O.J. Simpson and the case and the images and so on. But also, isn't that a brilliant metaphor to use the medium of film itself as a means of confronting your subconscious in the movie, because that's what the movie is about, and that's also what happens in the movie through the mystery man, right? Like that's a cool metaphor, isn't it?
I mean, once again, I have to see the film to really comment on that. But another thing I want to say is, which also is one of my criticisms that I have with David Lynch's films, especially Mulholland Drive, which is the one I've just recently rewatched with some friends of mine that also think it's like a genius masterpiece and like one of the greatest films ever made. And when I was talking to them about the film when it was over, I was like, okay, what's so good about this? I mean, I think it's a fine film. It's good. It has some interesting ideas, whatever. But what makes it so great? And one of them began to like say, oh, but did you notice that in the very opening scene there is this dance sequence, and then we get a flash of Diane or whatever she's called, and that already tells us that she was at this dance or whatever, that she won a contest, which is revealed later on. And I was like, okay, sure, but what, like, why does this matter? Like, what's so important about telling us this information before the credits, then telling it again at the end? And even if you know it, like, I don't think it has any real impact. The same thing with like, oh, in what moment in time are they right now, or whatever. To me, it feels just like gimmicks to make the film overly complicated, because the real story of Mulholland Drive, in my opinion, maybe I actually misunderstand something or whatever, is, well, it's basically just this disillusionment with the American dream. This young actress comes to Hollywood, and a bunch of bad stuff happens. I don't want to recap the entire film, but it's basically that. And we don't need those converging timelines and the memory loss and the fucking Club Silencio scene. Oh, everything is an illusion. Isn't that so deep? I mean, I guess, but if you're telling the same thing over the span of 100 minutes or however long the film is, and you have nothing more to say, so you have to obscure your message, I don't know what's so good about that.
I don't think that it is obscured. It is obscured maybe in the same way that the dream is obscured, but it's at the same time, I think, incredibly clear. Like, dreams and so on. But, so you're asking, why is this necessary, for example, with the opening scene? All right, I mean, you're telling a story. This is basically a character study. Why shouldn't you conclude a detail? Because details make stories more relatable. Isn't that the case? So, okay, you have this main character who goes to Hollywood to become a great actress, and there's this disillusionment. But why does she even want to go to Hollywood? Why does she think that she even has a chance to succeed there? It's, okay, most people most screenwriters or filmmakers would just not think about it. They would just say, okay, let her go there. She just has this dream for random, no more details, no more information. It's all good. Okay, David Lynch just goes the extra way and actually gives a reason, a motivation for her to go to Hollywood, and that is that she won in this contest and in this dance contest and so on. And I think that makes the entire story way more tragic because she has this moment of great success in her own mind. She goes to Hollywood with already the feeling to be a winner. So she is at this high point, and so the fall is way greater and way deeper because we start with this detail. And now how is this detail presented? Not in a cliched way, but in an incredibly creative, completely visual way. And yes, of course, it's reconfirmed later in a throwaway line, but just to open it up with this already incredibly fake looking dance scene with this upbeat music, but if you listen closely to it, there's a second score under this upbeat music that is like already mysterious and disturbing. It's in itself a brilliant scene. If you would only take this scene alone, this opening dance scene, as an abstract short film, it would already be a really great short film in itself. And it is a scene that conveys you a very clear message that is a very logical part of the plot that explains you a lot about the character, and it's doing it in a completely visual and creative way that you will probably not find in any other movie, quite in the way that it's conveyed in Mulholland Drive. So yes, it is a brilliant scene, it's a brilliant opening, and it makes a lot of sense for the movie and the character development and so on. And the Club Silencio scene, let's talk about that. It's all an illusion, isn't that deep? No, what's so deep is that by confronting yourself with the artificial nature of art, which is basically what is happening there. They're going there, they are watching a singer sing, it's all natural and so on, but then they get confronted with the artificial nature of this singing, that it's all like, there is no real band, it's all an illusion. And that's the moment, again, like in Lost Highway, when the subconscious of the protagonist starts breaking, because she is reminded that everything she's experiencing right now is an illusion in the sense that she is captured in this dream that she has about Hollywood and so on. And it slowly starts to crack and to open up. And it really is a transcendental scene. I don't know why, why you think that this is just slightly above average.
I can tell you why, especially with the Club Silencio scene, because I think the idea behind it, as with a lot of David Lynch's work, I think the basic idea behind it isn't bad. Like, it's honestly kind of clever. Take the Club Silencio scene and cut out everything except the singer. Yeah, except the singer and like the reaction of the characters. Just have the singer go to the mic, sing a song, and suddenly collapse to the floor and the song is going on. And then cut to the reaction or whatever, then it would be an actually good scene. But having this fucking showman straight up looking into the camera and telling you it's all an illusion, and having like the band do the exact same shtick as the singer later on, it takes away so much from the scene. I don't know, sometimes I really don't know what David Lynch is thinking. Like, he makes those very subtle decisions at times that are actually difficult to miss, especially on the first watch. And then...
You mean easy to miss?
What did I say?
Difficult.
Also, easy to miss. And then he makes these scenes where he's so incredibly unsubtle that it's almost insulting to the audience. I don't know, I think he manages to do neither very well. He never hits, to me at least, the sweet spot of giving you just enough information to understand, or even like subconsciously understand it if you want to go that route, because that's another thing. Like, every time I talk to a David Lynch fan, it's a 50% chance if they tell me oh, it's all about the feeling and the experience, and you're not supposed to really dissect the film or whatever. Or if they're telling me, oh, you just don't understand it because you missed these 10 details, and those will explain everything. It seems like people that watch his films don't even know themselves what they're about or what they like about it.
Wow, you mean that they are actually complex and people have different feelings about them but can also enjoy them for different reasons? What a crazy criticism of you, Tom. Oh my god.
It's
I guess he is just above average slightly.
it's not a criticism so much of the films, but rather of the fans that hail him to be this great artist, even though they, I don't know, yeah, maybe people just get different stuff out of his film, and I just happen to get nothing or next to nothing out of his films.
But I agree with that. That's why I think that he might be underrated, even by many of his fans, because if it's the same thing with Quentin Tarantino and so on, there are a bunch of Tarantino fans who have no clue what Tarantino movies are about, who don't think about the metaphors in it and so on, who don't even think about, in Django Unchained, why Christoph Waltz doesn't want to shake the hand of Leonardo DiCaprio and so on. They just accept it and think, oh, it's just random, it's just a joke or something. No, obviously not. Or why Dr. King, that's the actual character name of Christoph Waltz in that movie, doesn't want to hear Beethoven in this house of the slave owner and so on. They just don't think about it. They just say, oh, Beethoven didn't even wrote this piece of music when the movie takes place. How stupid can you even be? All right, so they are Tarantino fans, but don't even give a shit really about the movies. So Tarantino is absolutely underrated in that sense, that people don't take him seriously as an artist. And it's the same thing, I think, with many David Lynch fans, that they like him for the weirdness, for the balls that he definitely has, for the atmosphere, and that's all great, but that's absolutely underrating him, because his movies can be deciphered fairly easily, in my opinion. And yes, you can definitely understand the narrative of an abstract David Lynch movie if you try a little bit, or read some literature about it. So yes, but I agree with your criticism actually about the Club Silencio scene, that you could cut out those moments where this guy is like explaining, oh, it's all an illusion and so on. I agree with you. He could have done this and the scene might have been better. But the thing is, when you're asking, you don't understand what David Lynch is thinking and so on. I'm not sure that he's thinking all that much, honestly. I think it's all like a part of his own subconscious in a sense. And he said in one interview, when I made Eraserhead, I didn't know what these things meant or really meant. And I think that's exactly why he is this crazy genius who actually deserves to be called a genius, because he really just will think up something like, for example, Blue Velvet. What's the idea behind Blue Velvet? Red lipsticks, an ear in a field. That's it. And then he just writes down these crazy ideas without understanding what they mean. And at the end of it, you have a coherent narrative that you can interpret for hours, that is one of the most intricate character studies of all time and so on. And yes, just having this ability, I think, is very, very special and something that's completely original to him. And I don't know any other artist who is working quite in this way. Obviously, there are other surrealists and so on, but just somebody who can use genres as metaphors for parts of the consciousness or subconsciousness. For example, in Mulholland Drive, it starts out like a soap opera or like a rom-com or something. The same thing with Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks starts out like a sitcom, and the sitcom is the consciousness, and then it breaks open and opens itself up to this surreal horror space, and that's the subconscious in which David Lynch is driving into. So he uses the genre sitcom to resemble the conscious, and then goes into abstract surreal art house horror to depict the unconscious. Name me one other filmmaker who has ever done anything like this, especially before David Lynch.
Okay. a couple of things about this. First of all, you don't know any other artists who comes up with like single images and then later pieces them together to a coherent narrative. I think that's pretty much how everyone works. Um,
Yeah, but I said not quite in this way. Not quite in this way where you really have completely random things like red lipstick and the ear in a field, and then you just have pieces of paper. That's basically what he's doing. He's having like a piece of paper with red lipstick written on it. Then, okay, ear in a field, and that's it. That's it. But it somehow makes sense. No idea how he puts it all together, and I think he didn't even himself know all that much about this process. It is really like a dream, and it works. I think it works for me as well, but only with like actual dreams. With him, it's like daydreams. But I wrote down a bunch of dreams that I had, and in a sense, you will always discover single pieces, single dots that connect, and you can construct a narrative out of this. But again, I can only sort of do this like a little bit, and I have to interpret my dreams and so on. Like I have to consciously interpret with analysis and so on, and then maybe there will arrive some narrative out of that with a little interpretation. But I don't know, David Lynch just does it on a different level and with, I think, with less reflection. I think that's probably why so many scenes of his are over-explained or under-explained, because it just doesn't really give a fuck how explained they are.
and how is that not something I can criticize? If you don't think at all about the work you're doing, okay, I guess you could be someone like Jackson Pollock who really just does random hand movements with his paintbrush and then does his paintings like this. But if you want to tell a narrative, an actual narrative, a complex narrative, even like David Lynch tries, then I think you should think about what shots you're including and what you can edit out and what you maybe should add or whatever, because that actively takes away from the art, at least in my opinion. Of course, you can say you're fine with this approach and you like the movies despite or because they're like this. That's fine, but to me, that's a big weakness of his.
But I also have to say about this over-explaining and this unsubtlety in the Club Silencio scene, it doesn't really bother me that much because there is art that is over-explaining everything, like Goethe, for example. Read Goethe's Faust, or I think you yourself like it a lot, but you agree that Goethe has a certain style where things like "I'm the devil" are just basically um, explained like that, but it's just a different style. You know, it's a more theatrical style, it's a more maybe Shakespearean style where some metaphors are just on the surface like that, but there is a certain elegance and poetry and beauty about that too. And I can watch a scene like the Club Silencio scene like that.
I mean, yeah, I think it works in that style, in this poetic and overly dramatic style. I don't think it works as well if you're trying to make this like a surrealist movie. Yeah, I don't know. To me, those two ideas clash pretty much. And that's another thing I want to mention about a lot of Lynch's fans. Again, not really about him himself, but a lot of people seem to think that David Lynch like invented surrealism or dream logic or whatever. And holy fucking shit, like those people really piss me off. They attribute so much to Lynch that he didn't come up with, and things he did actually come up with, they don't attribute as much to him, I feel. Like, as far as I know, Twin Peaks was like one of the first, or maybe the first, serialized TV shows, you know, with one narrative that goes through the entire series. And that's actually a big accomplishment. I mean, the series itself is still mid, but this is a big accomplishment, a big contribution to TV and whatever. This is something he should get credit for, not, I don't know, having dreams and stuff and exploring the subconscious.
Yes, I completely agree, except for the Twin Peaks. All in all, you know, the series and the movie is maybe the greatest depiction of trauma and re-traumatization in art history in general. But what I also wanted to point out or remind you of, my question: is he now the only or first person, at least, that you know of who uses genre as parts of the conscious or subconscious?
I don't think so. I think genre is pretty much inherently exploring the conscious or the subconscious. Like, how do you avoid exploring either of those?
Well, for example, you could make a structural movie without any people. You could make movies that are anti-psychological, like the movies by Michael Haneke and so on, where it's all about actions and societal functions without ever exploring the psychological aspects of the characters, like in the Seventh Continent, where there's never a motivation that you actually see or hear or get. But
then this seems more like the exception to the rule than the other way around.
Okay, but still, you think that, do you understand what I mean? That you make a sitcom to show the consciousness of characters and even a town and maybe even an entire universe, basically, this Twin Peaks universe. And then you break open this genre in this same series that you have already established to be a sitcom or a soap opera, and then you go into this radically different genre like surreal horror to explore the same themes that you already see in the sitcom, but how they are taking place in the subconscious. And those two things are connected like conscious and subconscious are connected. Sitcom and surreal art house horror are connected. Is there anybody who uses genres in this way?
What about, for example, I mean, maybe I really don't quite understand what you're getting at. Maybe you could give an example, but what about Freaks, for example, by Todd Browning, where the film is melodrama with comedic elements, but then, of course, turns, it turns to this exploration of, I guess, society and what it means to be really disfigured and whatever. Maybe it's more on the nose, not as complex as some of Lynch's work, but is that at least the approach that you mean, or do you mean something completely different?
I don't think that Freaks is that much surrealistic, and also I don't think that it's that interested in showing the subconscious through images, like Lynch is doing. Like, for example, in Mulholland Drive, again, there are two different genres, radically opposed genres in Mulholland Drive that are completely opposite to one another. The first one is, like a surface level comedy, rom-com basically, with this smiling Naomi Watts. She's completely naive. She's a bad character, badly written character, but that's completely purposeful, of course, because that is the conscious image of herself. And then the movie is breaking, like the reality of the film is breaking. That's why Jean Baudrillard called it the better Matrix, and he's the person who inspired Matrix, and he said, Matrix doesn't really understand my theory of simulation and so on. Mulholland Drive might be the best movie to show how simulation works. Not like the Matrix, but actually like in Mulholland Drive, when this simulation breaks open and you then see the subconscious with this totally surreal scenes and images and so on. I think that's something completely different than Freaks. Don't you agree that the way, for me, Freaks is a melodrama, right? With Freaks, and then they explore things about these characters, but it never breaks open into a completely different genre. I mean, where's the point when it breaks? Where's this breaking point?
At the ending, I would say. I think the film is infamous for people think it's like this disturbing horror movie when it really isn't, except for like the last 5 minutes.
But how are those two things connected in the same way that conscious and subconscious are connected? That's not the same thing. That's just switching a little bit. the genre. Honestly, I don't think that it's even a break at all. Why should it be a break? You just see freaks being in conflict with other people and with each other, and then this conflict gets more intense, and then there's the ending of the movie. How is this a fundamental break in the reality that's shown in the movie? In the reality, really in the way like the Matrix. You see those images in the Matrix that are in green, that's the reality of the Matrix, and then you have the images in blue. That's the reality outside of the Matrix. Where do you have this, where you can point to a single image in Freaks and can say, this is reality A, and then you point at another image in Freaks and you say, this is reality B. Like you can do in the Matrix and like you can do in Mulholland Drive, just in a way more subtle way.
Okay, I'm sorry, but it seems like you're kind of moving a goalpost. I thought the original claim was what other film is using different genres to explore the subconscious. I don't think there has to be like two different realities or whatever to do that. And even if you take Mulholland Drive as an example, you yourself explained how the opening scene is already encompassing basically everything that's happening in the rest of the movie. So like, how is that a break if literally the opening scene is everything already?
Oh, it's not everything. Why is it everything? And
it's already the surreal imagery. It's already the kind of dark undertones with the artificial Hollywood stuff. It's already about this breaking of illusion and whatever. Is that exactly what we were talking about?
Yes, it's like in a Wagner opera. It's like the Ouverture. So it encompasses already the themes of the rest of the movie. But it is an Ouverture in a sense, in a Wagnerian style. You know, like the opening of Melancholia or something by Lars von Trier. You see the entire story in a completely different style. But it already encompasses, in a sense, it's a spoiler. But yeah, you know, like the title of A Man Escaped from Robert-Bresson, or like things in the theater by Bertolt Brecht.
Okay, so you agree with me or don't agree with me, or?
No, I disagree with you, of course. I mean, I would love to explain David Lynch to you, but I think your heart is just not open.
I think this is maybe my hot take of the episode. People that truly understand David Lynch probably don't like him as much as people that don't understand him. And maybe you are the exception to that rule, but from my experience, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, Tom, I'm very sorry that all of your friends are complete douchebags and idiots. No, I really am, because I can imagine your friends, and they are probably not these, I don't know, people who have a great understanding of cinema and shit like that. So, yes, I'm very sorry for your personal experiences and so on with the David Lynch fan base. Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, this is not like a personal front or whatever. I'm also talking a lot about people online and whatnot that, yes, I have come across in the wild. So yeah, should we come to a closing statement about the work and life of David Lynch? Okay. Yeah, as I said at the beginning, he seems like he was a very nice guy. It's of course sad that he died. He has made contributions to film history and TV history. Of course he has. That's undeniable, I think. But the films themselves, in my opinion, just aren't that great. They don't earn him the reputation of a great artist, in my mind. And even with all your explanations and all the explanations of all the other David Lynch fans that I've heard, I've never come across anything that really convinces me of the opposite. Maybe it will happen one day, maybe his films will grow on me. I can't say, of course, but as of now, yeah, he's like, alright.
One of the greatest geniuses in art history in general. Has probably created the greatest depiction of certain subconscious and conscious phenomena like traumatization and re-traumatization, don't know a single piece of art that conveys these themes as good and as deep as the great works of David Lynch. And I'm not only talking about Twin Peaks, but also about Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire, Lost Highway, and so on. So, yes, what can I say? A remarkable person as far as I can tell, but I don't even care about him as a person. If he was nice or not, I don't give a fuck. His movies stand above everything, and they stand above David Lynch as the person himself. As he himself said, you have to catch ideas like fish, and you can never be proud that the fish is big or good or anything like that. You can be proud that you can cook the fish in a good way, that you can present the fish in a good way. But he was never proud about his own ideas, because for him they were coming from this other place. And I think this is what you would expect from a genius. Like we think about Mozart and we think, why is Mozart so great? Not only because he made so great music and so on. It's not just that. It's that the music came so naturally to him. It seems that he has this special otherworldly connection to music that allowed him to work in this way. And I think it's the same thing with David Lynch and ideas. They seem to come from him as if from a different dimension. And that's, in most cases, the sign of a great genius who can do work where other people have to train decades and decades and decades to come even close, and it just seemed to come completely natural to him. So, yes, his understanding of the world was completely unparalleled, in the sense that he could see a guy chewing gum and then think, oh, is this guy a rapist? And it makes total sense, even though it's completely insane. And that's a very, very, very special thing that most people don't have. Most people are either insane or normal.
Okay, I just have to add one more thing, because you made the Mozart comparison. Things coming naturally to you, like great music, is not what makes him a genius. Maybe it was... okay, I don't want to say it like that, but what I really want to get at is that if you compare Mozart's notations and Beethoven's notations, I think we can agree that both were genius composers. Beethoven didn't compose his music like supernaturally or whatever. He like scribbles out every single note that isn't exactly where he wants it to be. It doesn't come naturally to him at all. It's like the most difficult work in the world to him. And okay, to Mozart, it was the easiest work in the world, maybe. So I just want to say that just because something comes natural to you, that's not why you're a genius or not a genius.
Yes, but I think it depends on how you use the term genius. But I think if we think about music, again, words don't have intrinsic meanings. But I think if people talk about geniuses in music, they think about Mozart because it was so natural to Mozart that it almost seemed like a supernatural gift and so on. Like that's one of the definitions of a genius, is that the competence, the ability almost seems like God-given, like something that they don't have to train for or something like that. For example, I don't know, like someone in quantum physics has definitely a very unique view of reality, but they most of the times have to work towards that, while there are some people in quantum physics who just have a completely natural way of understanding the stuff, and it just comes intuitively to them. And I think David Lynch is one of those people who has these ideas in this intuitive, natural way that other people have to work decades just to, get the way he's thinking, right? That's why you can't really copy David Lynch easily, because his way of thinking is something that you probably have to analyze for decades to get a grip of how he was thinking intuitively. And that's it. Yes, completely original, great loss for humanity. You can never fake a David Lynch film. I think the greatest showcase of that is the second season of Twin Peaks, where he wasn't involved that much. You immediately see from the first episode that he is not involved in it. You immediately get the difference. You immediately get that they are trying to fake the style. And then in the last episode of the second season, he is coming back, and you immediately immediately see the difference. It's clear as day, but you cannot really point your finger on it that easily.
Yeah, I disagree. If I'm not mistaken, he even did the first episode of the second season, but whatever, you can fact check me in the comments. Goodbye.